In this video, I'm going to show you how to write code for 4 relays instead of just 1. You could set this up for any number of relays. It doesn't really matter. As long as you have enough GPIO pins on the Electron, you can control as many as you want. But I'm just going to show you how to set up 4 relays just to show you how to set up multiple. I'm going to start out by setting up my pins. They're going to be pins D0 through D3, just because that's probably the block of 4 pins that makes the most sense if we're wanting to do 4 relays. So I'm not really worrying about the onboard LED anymore. Next, I'll create my setup function just like before. It's going to be pretty similar. It's going to be the same as my setup function from before. I'll just have to call pin mode output 4 times instead of just once. Just like before, I also have to register a particle function. I'm going to call it control relay. And the function that I'm going to actually set up in my code is going to be called also control relay. Like my other particle function, it has to return an int. And we also have limitations on what input we can take. So we have to just pass in a single string. The way I'm going to set this up is I'm going to expect the input to be a string of length 3, where the first character is a pin number, so 0, 1, 2, 3. Then there'll be a space, and then there'll be a 0 or a 1. That 0 or 1 will indicate whether or not we want the relay to be on or off. The way I'll set this up is saying I'll have a character pin equals input 0. So that's just accessing the first character in our input, which will correspond to the characters 0, 1, 2, or 3. I'll say bool state equals input 2 equals 1. The reason I've set it up this way is I want state to be a Boolean so that I can say digital write LED state or whatever, since this is actually a character, not technically an integer. So I'm just testing if they're the same. So if this is 1, state will be true, and otherwise it will be false. I'll then set up a switch block on pin. And you can see, just as an example, the first case, when input 0 is 0, I'll say digital write LED 0 state return 0. Now, normally, when you have a whole switch statement, you need to add break statements to make sure you don't just fall through, but since we're returning at the end, we don't have to worry about that. So I'll just set up my other cases. And you can see also that I'm just choosing to return the number of the pin that's passed in. Doesn't really matter what you return. I just think that's a good way to verify that the function did the case that you wanted. Finally, I'll add a default case. If we get passed in something unexpected, we'll just return -1. Alright, we should be ready to go and run this code. Just like last time, the wiring for this relay demo will be complex, so I'm going to go over how to do it first so you'll have some idea of what's coming later on. From our last wiring diagram, I'm going to erase some of the pieces that we don't need anymore. First, I'm going to show you how to wire up each of the power, ground, and control for each of the relays. Instead of using just one GPIO pin, D7, we'll use 4 pins, D0 through D3. This time we'll use only 1 column's worth of holes in the main section of the breadboard. And remember, since they're in the same column, they're not connected. But we'll use both columns in the side section of the breadboard. The holes in this section are connected vertically instead of horizontally. We'll run a wire from the 3.3 pin on the Electron to the red side of this section, and a wire from ground to the blue section. Finally, for each relay, we'll connect their power to the red side, their ground to the blue side, and their control to the corresponding GPIO pin. Now that our code is written, we're ready to start wiring things together. First, I'm going to talk about a few of the pieces that we're going to use. This is my whole relay assembly. You can see I have 4 of the relays like we've already used. They're connected to a piece of acrylic. I'd recommend that when you're actually assembling your box, you also probably want to attach them to something like acrylic, but for this demo, it's probably fine to have them loose. We'll also include dimensions and the like for this piece of acrylic so that you can cut out one that looks like ours. I also have these connections here that you would hook up ground over here, which then goes in to all of the relays, and then each of the relays connects to one spot over here. These are all Grove connectors, which I've taped the Grove connector onto itself just so it becomes a little bit more compact. And we have male-to-male breadboard cables plugged in here. I've tried to match colors roughly. All of the reds are plugged into oranges. You see we have a blue ground wire here instead of a black, but all the yellows are connected to yellow Grove wires, oranges are to reds, and the blacks and the blues are to blacks. On the other end here, I've taped things together based on what color they are and not what Grove connector they're hooked up to. And these here are the wires that let us actually control the relays. I don't have them taped together, but instead you can see I have the number that they're supposed to be plugged into taped on here, so 0 should go in D0, 1 goes in D1, etc. I have 2 other male-to-male wires here, just for later. So I have my electron here. I'm going to take one of my male-to-male cables and plug it in the same row as my power wire and plug it in over here next to the plus sign, and I'm going to plug this wire into the same row as my ground and then plug it in to this row here. Now the reason I'm doing this is although in the main section of the breadboard things in the same row this way are connected, in this side section the connection runs vertically instead. So the idea is everything on this left side next to the red is connected this way, and everything on the blue side is connected, but they're not connected this way. So what this does is it creates a whole column here which is connected to the ground on the electron, and a whole section here which is connected to the power on the electron. It'll make our life a lot easier when wiring up the rest of our relays. I have my relays over here, and I'll start plugging in the Grove connections. So this is going to be relay number 0. Next I'll plug in my little packet number 1, and so on and so forth. Now I'll plug in the power and ground for the relays. So I'll take all my ground wires and stick them in over here in this blue column on the breadboard. And I'll do the same for all my orange wires, except I'll put them in the red column. Finally, I'm going to plug in all of my control cables. You can see here we have D0 through D3. I'll take my cable number 0, plug it into D0, take 1, plug it into D1, take 2, plug it into D2, take 3, plug it into D3. So now all our wiring is set up, at least for controlling our relays, and we'll start out with our first demo with this setup. I've compiled and pushed my code to the electron. If you don't remember how to do that, like before, go ahead and review the section in our first video about compiling and flashing to the electron. Actually calling our function is going to be pretty similar to before. I'll just say particle call demo electron control relay, and then this time, since I'm planning on having a space in the string that we're passing in, I'm going to put it explicitly in quotes. So I'll say 0, 1. This should turn on relay 0. If I move this to the side, it doesn't really want it to move so you can see it, but indeed the light is on the relay. I can call this for all my other relay numbers. You can see that each time it returns the pin number of the relay. and I can just as easily go and turn them all off. Of course, there's no point in controlling the relay if it's not hooked up to anything. You'll start out with your 4 relays, all connected like this. You'll connect the contact they all have in common to the ground on the breadboard, which, if you remember, will be that just entire blue column. Next, you'll want to find 3 empty rows on the breadboard not connected to anything. On the other side of the relays, you'll pick whichever relay you want to use, and connect that one to an empty row. Then, just like before, we'll hook up our LED and our resistor. On the other side, we'll connect to power by running a wire from our empty row to the red column, which we had connected to the 3.3 pin. Now let's go ahead and try it. Now that we simply know how to turn the relays on and off, I'm going to show you how to wire up the relays with an actual LED. I'm not going to hook it up so that each relay is connected to an individual LED. I'm just going to use the same LED over and over again and plug it into different spots. So, to start out, I'm going to go over here to make common is connected and unscrew that a little bit, make sure it's loose. I have a male-to-male wire here that I'm going to use. A lot of times with these sorts of connections you would use bare wire, but I don't have any handy, and this should work fine too. And then I'm going to plug this in to my Electron's breadboard to the ground side. Now, just to clarify, it's not like the red wires over here are high voltage and the black ones are ground. It's just a connection. They're essentially on opposite sides of the same switch. That's the relay. The red's there to just make it a little bit easier to see. I'm going to start out by taking this green male-to-male wire and hooking it up so it's connected to relay number 0 right here. I'm going to plug it in an empty row, and then I will take my resistor that I used earlier with my LED and plug it in just for convenience with the ends in different rows. And then I'll take my LED and stick the long end in one row and the short end in the same row as the resistor. And finally, I'm going to take this orange wire and plug it in the same row as my LED, and then also in this column with the high voltage. And it should be ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and say particle call demo electron control relay in quotes 0, 1. And there we go. I'm going to turn that off, and then I will power down my Electron, change my wiring, and show you guys what it looks like with a different relay. Now I'm connected to the relay with port number 1. And you can see when I trigger that, the LED turns on. And when I go back and try to turn it on using relay number 0, you can see the relay clicks, but the LED does not light up. And you could see how I could connect the LED to any of the connections on the relay.